People drop their coffee, abandon their cars, and sprint for stairwells and underground shelters as the first distant booms roll across the city. Within seconds, the skyline is lit by streaks of light as Israel's air defenses wake up, firing interceptor after interceptor into the night. But this time, it is not just one city under fire. Hundreds of kilometers away in Haifa, the same alarms are blaring, the same flashes are cutting through the darkness, and the same question is hanging in the air. How did it come to this? For years, Iran and Israel fought a war most people never saw directly. It played out in sabotaged facilities, quiet cyber attacks, and mysterious explosions deep inside research centers and critical infrastructure. Cargo ships were hit in strange accidents at sea. Nuclear scientists died in highly precise attacks, and militias aligned with Tehran launched rockets at Israeli targets, while officials on all sides pretended it was all contained. Everyone understood the rules. Keep the blows limited, keep things deniable, and never push so far that a full-scale war becomes unavoidable. That unspoken agreement held until it didn't. According to multiple reports, the turning point came when Israel decided that deterrence from the shadows was no longer enough. Israeli planners launched strikes deep inside Iranian territory, targeting strategic facilities tied to Tehran's military and long-range weapons programs. From Israel's perspective, these were preemptive moves, an attempt to stop a threat before it fully matured and became much harder, and far more costly, to neutralize. But in Tehran, those same strikes were read as a red line being crossed, a direct hit on sovereignty, prestige, and the credibility of the regime in the middle of its own internal pressures. Iran's leadership could not afford to simply absorb the blow and move on. Doing nothing would have looked like weakness at the exact moment rivals and allies alike were measuring its resolve. So, a decision was made. Instead of another round of quiet retaliation through proxies, Tehran would respond in a way that everyone could see. A way that would put its flag directly on the attack and show the region, and the world, that Iran was willing to escalate openly, not just through partners and militias. When the missiles finally came, they did not arrive as a trickle. They came in waves. Radar operators across Israel suddenly saw their screens fill with blips, multiple launches detected from Iranian territory and Allied positions, pointing straight at Israeli skies. What made this strike different was not only the number of projectiles, but the way they were distributed. Instead of concentrating on a single city, Iran aimed at Tel Aviv and Haifa at the same time. Tel Aviv is Israel's financial and commercial engine, a dense urban center packed with offices, tech hubs, and residential towers. Haifa, further north, is a strategic industrial and port city, home to petrochemical plants, shipping terminals, and critical infrastructure that keeps the country's economy moving. Hitting both cities simultaneously was not about symbolism alone. It was a calculated move to stretch Israel's defenses to their limits. Each incoming missile forced the system to make rapid decisions. Which trajectory posed real danger, which target was more critical, and where to spend an interceptor that can't be replaced overnight. As the missiles crossed into Israeli airspace, the country's layered defense system roared to life. Iron Dome batteries began tracking short-range and slower threats. David's sling locked onto larger, faster projectiles. Arrow 3 targeted longer-range ballistic missiles heading for high-value sites. In the sky above both cities, interceptors collided with incoming missiles in brilliant flashes of light, raining fragments over buildings and streets. Many warheads were destroyed, but not all of them. Because in any large-scale attack, the math is brutal. If enough missiles are fired, some will always slip through. Those that did reach their targets left a clear mark. In Tel Aviv, residential blocks and commercial buildings near impact zones showed shattered glass, cracked facades, and scorched vehicles scattered across parking lots. People who failed to reach shelters in time described feeling shockwaves slam through their apartments and stairwells. In Haifa, the concern was not just the physical damage, but the risk that even a single hit in the wrong spot could trigger fires or secondary explosions in industrial areas that are tightly packed and highly sensitive. Emergency services raced between impact sites, putting out fires, treating the injured, and securing damaged structures, while the sound of interceptions continued overhead. For many Israelis, this attack did not just feel like another round in an endless conflict. It felt like a new level, a direct challenge to the country's belief that its defenses, however strained, would always be enough to keep such scenes rare and localized. On paper, Israel's air defense architecture is one of the most sophisticated in the world. Iron Dome protects against short-range rockets and drones, David's sling intercepts larger and faster missiles, and Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 handle high-altitude ballistic threats. This layered system was designed to catch as much incoming fire as possible before it reaches cities, bases, and infrastructure. And in this attack, it did what it was built to do. It intercepted a significant percentage of the missiles headed for populated areas. But even the most advanced systems have limits. The real vulnerability is not in the radar or the guidance algorithms, it's in the ammunition. Each interceptor is a complex, expensive piece of hardware, and every launch is a choice to spend a resource that cannot be magically replenished overnight. Iran's strategy, like that of other states and groups that have studied Israel's defenses, leans heavily on saturation. Fire enough projectiles from enough angles, and you start to force impossible decisions on the defenders. In a scenario where dozens or hundreds of missiles arrive nearly at once, defenders have to prioritize. Some threats are more dangerous than others. Some trajectories suggest a direct hit on a dense urban area, while others look likely to fall in open space or cause limited damage. The system will not try to intercept everything because it can't. Instead, it chooses, and in that choosing, it leaves some threats to pass through the net. This is exactly what Iran's planners banked on. By targeting Tel Aviv and Haifa together, they forced Israel to spread its defensive firepower across multiple regions, multiple angles, and multiple types of weapons. The result was a high interception rate, and still visible damage on the ground. That image of a heavily defended country still taking hits was part of the message Tehran wanted to send. Even with all your systems, we can still touch you. Behind the scenes, another concern was growing. Every successful interception comes with a cost: depleted stockpiles, increased pressure on production lines, and a reliance on allies to resupply complex components. Over time, those costs add up, especially if the conflict stretches on and new waves of attacks keep coming. For Israel, maintaining the illusion of near invulnerability has always been a strategic asset. This attack showed that SHIELD is strong, but it is not unbreakable. While Israelis watched their skies, Iranians were watching their own. Israeli and U.S. strikes have hit multiple sites across Iran, including locations in and around Tehran and other cities associated with military and strategic programs. Explosions, disrupted communications, and damaged infrastructure have become part of the background noise of daily life in several regions. But even as missiles and drones targeted facilities on the ground, another battle was unfolding at the very top of Iran's political system. The death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei became one of the most consequential turning points in the country's recent history. The Assembly of Experts, the body charged with choosing his successor, convened under extraordinary pressure. The country was under attack, its forces were engaged against Israel and indirectly the United States and its partners, and the world was watching to see if the leadership transition would expose internal fractures. Instead, the assembly moved quickly and appointed his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, as the new supreme leader. Officially, the transition was presented as smooth, controlled, and rooted in continuity. But beneath the surface, rumors and analysis pieces have raised questions. Was this succession planned far in advance or accelerated by the conflict? Did key power centers inside the security services and political elite rally around Mojtaba out of conviction, or out of fear that any delay would invite challenges and internal chaos? Reports suggest that the new leader's first major task is to prove that he can manage both war and politics without appearing weaker than his father in the eyes of domestic rivals and foreign adversaries. Strikes on Iranian infrastructure, combined with international sanctions and a long-standing economic crisis, have deepened the pressure on everyday citizens. Internet slowdowns, energy disruptions, and reports of damage to industrial facilities have added to a sense of vulnerability inside the country. At the same time, state media continues to present the conflict as a test of national resilience, framing the missile strikes on Israel as proof that Iran can still project strength even under attack. In that environment, escalation is not just a military choice, it is a political calculation. Backing down too soon risks making the new leadership look fragile. Pushing too far risks provoking a response that could inflict damage on a scale the state might struggle to absorb. And all of that is playing out while citizens in Iran, like those in Israel, are trying to live ordinary lives under extraordinary circumstances. The missiles aimed at Tel Aviv and Haifa did not just send a message to Israel, they echoed across the entire Middle East. Gulf states, many of which have carefully balanced relations with both Western powers and Iran, suddenly found themselves facing a scenario they have long feared: a direct Iran-Israel confrontation spilling into their neighborhood. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain are now navigating a tightrope. On the one hand, they rely heavily on stable energy exports, foreign investment, and a reputation for relative security. On the other, they cannot ignore the reality that missiles and drones have already struck energy infrastructure and military facilities across the Gulf, either directly or through Iranian-aligned groups. Some states have boosted their own air defenses, shifted military assets, and quietly tightened coordination with U.S. forces deployed in the region. Israel's actions are also reshaping the strategic map. Its campaign of strikes against Iranian targets and networks has expanded, hitting not only Iran itself but also infrastructure and logistics tied to Tehran's regional allies. That sends a clear message. Any territory used to support attacks against Israel could become a battlefield. For Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, that reality raises the stakes dramatically, as local groups tied to Iran weigh the risks of deeper involvement. At the same time, the broader Arab world is not neatly aligned into pro-Iran or pro-Israel camps. Different governments read this conflict through the lens of their own histories, alliances, and domestic pressures. Some see an opportunity to assert regional leadership or extract concessions from global powers desperate to limit the fallout. Others simply hope to avoid being dragged into a confrontation that could destabilize their economies and their streets. If the missile barrage over Israel showed the human face of this conflict, the battle over energy routes shows its global impact. The Middle East, and especially the Gulf, remains the heart of the world's oil and gas system. A huge share of global crude and liquefied natural gas exports still passes through a narrow maritime corridor, the Strait of Hormuz. As the Iran-Israel confrontation escalated, Iran signaled its willingness to use that choke point as leverage. Threats and attacks on shipping, strikes near key terminals, and increased military activity around the strait have already pushed a significant share of global oil and gas supplies offline. Analysts estimate that around a fifth of the world's crude and natural gas exports have been disrupted at various points during the crisis as producers halt shipments, reroute cargoes, or shut down damaged infrastructure. The effect on prices has been immediate. Oil has surged, and gas markets, particularly those dependent on LNG cargoes from Qatar and other Gulf producers, have been thrown into turmoil. For ordinary people, this shows up as higher fuel costs, more expensive flights, elevated shipping prices, and rising bills for energy-intensive goods and services. In some cases, governments have had to tap strategic reserves or scramble for alternative supplies, reshaping energy trade flows in real time. This crisis is not just about short-term price spikes. It is highlighting just how fragile the current global energy system remains. One regional conflict has been enough to trigger what some analysts are calling the most serious energy shock in years, if not decades. And the longer the confrontation drags on, the more likely it becomes that temporary disruptions turn into long-term structural shifts. New pipelines, new alliances, and perhaps a faster push toward alternative energy in some regions. As missiles fly and energy markets swing, the world's major powers are anything but passive. The United States, now led by President Donald Trump after his return to office, has been directly involved in military operations and diplomatic maneuvering related to this conflict. Washington has launched its own strikes, coordinated closely with Israel, and issued ultimatums over the status of the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, the U.S. is grappling with the economic and political cost of sky-high energy prices and a drawn-out confrontation. Reports indicate that the Trump administration has oscillated between aggressive military posturing and attempts to find a way out that does not look like a defeat. There have been moments when U.S. officials signaled readiness for a large operation to fully reopen Hormuz, followed by more cautious talk of timelines, limits, and the need for allies to shoulder more of the burden. Back-channel proposals, some transmitted through intermediaries like Pakistan, have floated ceasefire ideas, compensation demands, and security guarantees. So far, none of these have produced a stable agreement, and fighting continues. Other powers, including European states, Russia, and China, are watching closely and quietly trying to protect their own interests. Europe is highly exposed to energy price shocks and shipping disruptions. Russia sees opportunities and risks in how the conflict reshapes global oil and gas flows. China, heavily dependent on Middle Eastern energy, is weighing how much to involve itself in de-escalation efforts without getting dragged into a confrontation it did not choose. Behind closed doors, intelligence channels, diplomatic missions, and emergency summits are all trying to answer the same question. How far can this escalate before control is lost? So far, the answer is unclear. All of the strategy, technology, and diplomacy sit on top of one simple reality. People are living through this. In Tel Aviv, families now go to sleep wondering if the next siren will give them enough time to reach a shelter. Parents rehearse with their children what to do when the alarms sound, timing the run from bedroom to stairwell to safe room. Haifa residents look out over the port and industrial zone and wonder what a direct hit on a key facility would mean for the air they breathe, the jobs they depend on, and the safety of their neighborhoods. On the other side of the conflict, Iranian citizens are dealing with their own version of this anxiety. They've seen footage of strikes on their cities, heard the distant echoes of explosions, and felt the impact of damaged infrastructure and strained services. They are told by state media that their country is standing up to foreign aggression, but they are also the ones who endure the consequences when sanctions bite deeper, when fuel becomes scarce, or when businesses shut down. For many, the decisions that shape their future are made in government complexes in foreign capitals they will never see, by officials they will never meet. In both countries, there are people who have no say in the strategic calculations that dominate the headlines, yet they are the ones who carry the emotional, economic, and physical burden of the conflict. They are the ones explaining to their children why the sky sometimes glows at night, why the internet cuts out without warning, or why the price of basic goods keeps rising. They are also the ones who will still be there when the last missile is fired and the last summit statement is read out. The missile strikes on Tel Aviv and Haifa, the leadership transition in Tehran, the pressure on the Strait of Hormuz, and the direct involvement of global powers have all pushed this confrontation into territory that previous crises never fully reached. Each new escalation lowers the threshold for what feels normal and raises the risk that a single miscalculation could trigger something far worse. There are two broad paths ahead. In one, the shock of this phase, the saturation attacks, the defense strain, the economic fallout, forces all sides to search for some kind of off-ramp, even if it is messy and fragile. Back-channel agreements, regional guarantees, and quiet understandings could eventually slow the rate of strikes and reopen vital shipping lanes, even if the deeper rivalry never truly ends. In the other path, these same events become the new baseline, a starting point for further escalation in range, intensity, and targets. For now, nobody can say with confidence which path will win out. What is certain is that the decisions made in Tehran, Jerusalem, Washington, and the Gulf capitals over the coming weeks will shape not just the fate of this conflict, but the security landscape of the Middle East and the stability of the global energy system for years to come. And for the civilians under these skies, the question is painfully simple. Will the next night be quieter than this one, or worse? Do you want the next script to lean even more on emotional civilian stories, or more on military and geopolitical analysis like this one?